Hi class, this is Professor Pronte, and I've put together this little video to help introduce some of the material from Chapter 1. Definitely you're going to want to read Chapter 1 of our textbook, and this little video here is intended to supplement some of that stuff. So you'll see some stuff that's in the reading, and then also some extra stuff, which as a reminder, this extra stuff is going to show up on your quiz. So it might be a good idea to take some notes here. All right, so with that in mind, I've got a couple of goals, right, things I want to accomplish here with this quick little video. And you can see the main topics that we're after here on the board behind me. First thing that we're going to go over is what is economics, right? I know for a lot of you this is going to be your very first class in the discipline. And so we should take some time here in the very beginning to try to summarize what economists do, what's the field all about. Secondly, we're going to talk about economic systems. Right? Here we're going to start thinking about government and what governments can do to organize a nation's economy. Related to that, learning item here number 3, I'm going to talk about the 3 big questions of economics. Right? So these are going to be big questions for the United States. They're big questions for every country and every society about how they want to set up their economy. And then fourth and finally, I'm going to talk about what it means to use a mixed economy, which is actually the answer to some of these big questions on number 3. All right, so begin with, what is economics all about? It's kind of a hard thing to address because economists don't just study one issue or one problem. Instead, we focus on all kinds of stuff. There's a connecting thread, though, right, that brings together all the different areas of economics. And that connecting thread is this idea of scarcity. Scarcity, or to say that something is scarce. So I hope you've heard that word before. If something is scarce, it just means that it's limited. Right? There could be a lot of it, there could be a little of it. We could be talking about abstract things, we could be talking about concrete resources. But the property of scarcity is simply that something exists in a limited way. It's a big idea. A lot of the stuff, almost all of the stuff that you encounter in your everyday life, I would argue, is scarce. Right? Your time is scarce. Right? You're sitting here watching a video with me, you could be doing something else. Right? You only have a limited amount of time. Your money is scarce. A country's resources are scarce. Company deciding to produce whatever they're producing has scarce resources, right? They can take money and use those resources on hiring workers, or instead on machinery, or instead on advertising. Right? And so the point that I'm trying to make is that scarcity is something that's all over the place. Just about everything is scarce, and it presents a problem. That problem is, how do we use these resources? Because we see scarce resources, it requires that people make choices. So what's economics? Economics is studying how people deal with that. We look at those choices that people are making when using scarce resources and try to draw meaningful inferences, try to draw conclusions about whether or not they're doing well, making good choices, being efficient, maximizing profit, maximizing utility, or if instead they'd be better off doing something else. Right? And so economics, to summarize, is the study of how people deal with these scarce resources. Okay. So with that said then, let's move on to our second idea about an economic system. Countries have scarce resources and need to come up with a framework about how these resources are going to move around in an economy. And so we need to come up with an economic system. Words like capitalism, and socialism, and communism, and free markets. Right? These all have relevance when you're talking about an economic system. Let me define it. Right. An economic system is a set of rules, laws, and institutions govern the economy. These rules and laws and practices that are going to guide the consumption of goods and services and the production of goods and services. Right? Really, when you're talking about an economic system, The idea is that a country has to come up with a framework, right? Design their government in a way they're going to allow people to address these economic matters. The three big questions of economics are very much related to what sort of economic system a country has decided to use. So what are they? Right? So one question, I'm going to scoot over. One of these big questions that all countries have to decide is what stuff do we want to make? What goods and services to produce? It's not a set list. The U.S. could make all kinds of things. We could make coffee. We could make T-shirts. We could make cars. We could make electronics. How is it decided, and who decides what a given economy is going to end up producing? Right? This is question number one. Societies have to come up with some way they're going to answer that, a process for answering what stuff we want to make. All right. Big question number two. How are we going to make all this stuff? How to produce the goods and services. Question number two is about the production technique that's going to be used. Right, so there's not just one way to make something. You can use lots of workers and a little bit of machinery. You can have a couple of workers and give them really sophisticated machinery. You can vary in terms of what types of materials you want to use. Right? There's a million different ways that you can go about making a product. So who decides this? Countries have to come up with a framework for answering question number two. Finally then, question number three on our list is who gets the goods and services? Given that an economy has made all this stuff, how is it going to be distributed? How do we figure out who gets what and in what quantities? So what do you think? How do we do this in the US? Who is it that decides what we're going to make, how it gets made, who gets what? For a lot of the stuff that we consume, there isn't just one person, right? There's no one person sitting in an office that's saying we need to have this much of this product made and that much of another product. It's a lot of people that answer these questions. For most of the things that we consume, guys, we rely upon markets. I hope you've got this already. I'm going to erase. Okay. We rely upon markets in large part to answer those three big questions. A market means that you've got individuals, consumers and producers, interacting with one another, and everybody's able to act in their own interest. So buyers can decide, yeah, I'd like to buy this, or no, I wouldn't. Consumers can decide, I'm going to offer this at this price, or maybe I won't. Maybe I'll sell something different. Maybe I'll offer a lower price. It's private individuals acting in their own interest, doing what they think is best. This describes behavior in a market. And so for a lot of the stuff that we buy, a shirt, your computer, your car, the dinner that you're going to eat tonight, a lot of those things, the way that it comes to be, the way that it's produced, we rely upon market forces rather than the other possibility, which is to have a government plan process. A government plan process. Instead of just leaving it up to private forces, another option would be to have the government decide, okay, we want to have this many pizzas produced. This is the way to make those pizzas. This is who should get which pizzas. Right? So I'm hoping then when you think about all the mix, that mix of goods and services that you consume, you're seeing that in our daily lives, we've got a little bit of both. Right? There's lots of stuff that you buy from a private business. Right? In that case, provision of the good comes from a market. There's also lots of stuff, though, that you get from the government. Right? Driving on a road, going to a park, protection from the military, protection from firefighters, lots of things that the government provides for us. We don't buy it in a market. So what does that mean then about our economic system? What it means is that in the United States and in most countries on earth, we use both these processes. We call that a mixed economy. Mixed economy. Probably we use markets more, but most definitely there's elements of both of these in our economic system. Okay. There you go, guys. I hope you're clear after the video on what economics is all about, what an economic system is, 3 big questions, and a mixed economy. See you next time.